I wanted to start off right with the title of our program. When you think of the tough stuff in terms of living with metastatic breast cancer long term, what comes to mind for each of you?
Well, I can start out. I think the tough stuff, and I don't know if most people that are listening can relate to this, but with the diagnosis of cancer, initially you go through this shock and awe phase. And you go through a phase of, cancer is the first thing that wakes you up in the morning and the last thing you think about before you go to sleep. And so, I just want to let people know out there, especially those that are newly diagnosed, that phase does go away. But when you're going through it, you feel like it's never going to go away. And, once you get into your treatment process and you sort of get into a new routine and what everybody commonly refers to as your new normal, then you finally have periods where you're not constantly thinking about it. And, cancer is your constant companion throughout the day. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I'll also say that I just, when you're given this label, it feels like a scarlet letter. You feel like you have been thrust into a whole different population that's different from, the normal population, for lack of a better term. You wish you had your old problems just to deal with because they would be easier to deal with than this big thing called cancer. And it really takes a while to really feel like you're not isolated and you're not thrust into a whole different universe that no one else can relate to. And I think that's, the first thing that you're faced with, when you're faced with this diagnosis, whether it's early breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you. Thank you. Anne, I see you nodding your head, especially when
Well, I can definitely echo a lot of
talking about the feeling of isolation. Go right ahead.
I can echo what Stephanie said. Sorry. I can echo what Stephanie said on a lot of things, but I think there's also, it's answering that question over and over again. How long are you going to be on this treatment?
Yes.
And the answer, no matter how many treatments I've been on, is always until this one fails, and I hope they have another one for me. And then it's that deer in the headlights look as people kind of sometimes on the lucky days, they get it that this is an awful question to ask. And that there's no good answer because, I'm doing the treatments the best I can, working on the hardest I can, but I'm waiting for them to fail and then I'll move on to the next treatment. And I think that that's, such an awkward place to be time and time again, and reiterating that with especially my caregivers and my family, that they don't ask it anymore like that. But nonetheless, there's still that we're waiting for this one to fail. And I think that that's, we're not under this luxury of hope that we're waiting for this one to be the cure and everything's going to be great. Because while that would be wonderful, after 7 years of living with metastatic breast cancer, I don't have that pipe dream anymore. And, we have to readjust to, as Stephanie calls it, or, mentioned it, the normal. The normal is I will always be on treatment. And we hope that there are always ones that are available for when this one fails. So, yeah, I think having the same conversation again and again is one of the tiring things of MBC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but things that you can't see, that's what you have to, you're walking around all the time, especially you can't really see someone that's depressed or that has the mental health impact of this disease. So you're walking around like you are still quote unquote normal, but not actually feeling that way on the inside. It's just sometimes you wish you could just flip yourself inside out and say, see, this is what it's like. But it happens, and you do adjust to the new normal. And sometimes that new normal isn't anything that you ever imagined that you would be at any time in your life. So you just have to adjust your sail, as they say.
Mhm.
So all three of you have talked about adjusting. So moving through metastatic breast cancer. So allowing yourselves, and I wonder if you could fill in some of the gaps for me here, allowing yourselves some kind of flexibility or freedom. How does that work for each of you? Because I think it's a wonderful thing for our attendees to hear about.
Yes.
Stephanie's laughing. Okay.
Flexibility.
I know.
I am the new Gumby and Pokey people. Let me tell you, I can be flexible. You can get up in the morning feeling like crap, and then you do what you have to do. I mean, you have to. You can't allow this disease to dictate everything that you do. There's times I'm sure that you would like to, and that we do.
Mhm.
But my part, the mental health part was hard for me. Being a nurse, you're not supposed to need that external help to get through hard things. But I did. I fell off the mountain and I received the help. I still talk to someone, and it doesn't make me any more crazier than anybody else, because I found out that everybody has somebody to talk to, more so than not. So it is, you have to be flexible. You can't get up anymore and say, by 10 o'clock I'm going to do this, or 11 o'clock I'm going to do that, and it won't work for you. And I think you would be more stressed trying to realize to fit your life that way. You just have to roll with the punches and try to again adjust.
Well, it's hard though, because, as my husband has said recently, cancer hijacks your life, and when one person in the family has cancer, everyone has cancer, because your diagnosis and your treatment has to be taken into consideration. And so, for me, I think all of us have to plan our lives around our treatment. I live in 3-week cycles. I have chemotherapy every 3 weeks. And, and this is the first year that I haven't calendared it out. So I have things coming up and I haven't even looked at it. But, my husband has already done that, for the whole year, and he knows better than I do. So, we really have to think long and hard about what we're going to do when it's done, the timing of it. That becomes very, very important. And then you get used to your body never being the same. I often wonder, whose body is this? And why can't I get my old body back? And you have to get used to looking in the mirror and seeing a different face looking back at you. There's weight gain, there are aches and pains that come along with this. There's fatigue, and you have to learn over time what your new limitation is going to be and how you're going to work around that. So you have to learn how to find the flexibility in dealing with this, because in a lot of ways, there are certain things you can't be flexible about.
Certain things you can't be, but I also hear doing what you can do
Yes.
to live the life that you want to lead, right? So living that life around the treatments, because the treatments allow the life to happen.
Yes, and it can be done.
And it can be done. So
Obviously, it can be done.
So
We're
speaking
all
of
here,
treatments, maybe we could.
What did you say, Stephanie?
I said, of course
Yeah.
it can be done. Look at us. We're all here, right?
I know, we're all here.
And we are so grateful that you are, all of you. So, Janine, how are we doing? We have any questions?
We do, and we have one that's related to what you're talking about. So one of our participants says that she's planning to retire early because she's sick of her entire life consisting of doctors and work, and understands that she doesn't have a normal life expectancy. But when you don't know how long you have, which is information that would be helpful for making informed decisions and financial plans, what can you do? What tips do the panelists have for being able to plan for the future when you don't know how long the future looks like?
I can answer that. I was forced to retire early, if that's what you want to call it, due to the side effects of this disease. And you can't. That was hard. I'm gonna honestly say that was the breaking point for me during this whole process. It wasn't that I had an incurable disease. It was that I couldn't work anymore. So, and that was like 3 years in. But you have to. Um, I suggest that if anybody can quit work and do the things that you want to do, because even I have friends that are quote unquote disease free, that have never had cancer, and they work themselves to death until retirement. And then who's to say that day 2 of their retirement, they have a massive MI, they die, and get to do crap, during their retirement. So take the time that you can now, and do some of those fun things or those things that you wanted to do, if you can afford to do them, and don't hold back.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, and
Anne, you were going to chime in there?
Yeah. I think my advice, I probably thought long and hard about my early retirement. I was in my late 40s for 2 years before I did it, because I wanted to make sure that I could afford to do it and not bankrupt my family, which meant that if I could find a financial advisor, I happen to have a contract at work, or a lawyer who could help advise me and help me have these conversations. And then what I wish I could have taken more advantage of, but COVID actually kind of overlapped with when I did leave work, was a little bit more therapy, because I think for so many of us that we define ourselves by our jobs, and to switch from defining yourself from being a nurse or a teacher or an executive or whatever it is to a full-time MBC patient, and people want to know what you're doing, especially if you, God forbid, still have hair, because then you must still be healthy. And I'm totally kidding about that. I hope you know. but that's what people ask me. What do you do now? And my answer was focus on healing and getting the sleep and eating better meals and spending time with at the time both of my kids were still here in high school. So, I think it's get the expert advice. That are the panels and the Facebook groups are great, but being able to have a conversation with someone who can really say to you, here's what disability will look like if you're eligible for that. Here's what, you should know about, the time frames and everything, and how it's going to impact your bottom line. If you're in a dual income situation, what that looks like and what healthcare looks like. For me, knowledge was power, and it took me 2 years to get the knowledge I needed to finally have the courage to say, I don't need to do this anymore. And I also felt like I was being passed up on opportunities, which just made it even worse. Like there was a little bit of salt in there, that I'd worked so hard for opportunities that now I was the sick one, so I wasn't going to get to have. So I think that, that kind of helped. But again, I think having the experts to talk you through it makes a world of difference, and just gives a peace of mind that you can't find at 2:00 in the morning when you're sitting online going, can I quit my job tomorrow? Because that's where we all get to. So.
Yeah, what to do about work and how to juggle work with this diagnosis is definitely one of the tough topics. And I'm probably the one who went on disability, the most recent. So, when I was diagnosed, I was a practicing physician in private practice, taking care of 20 patients, in the hospital at a time. I was an independent contractor. I was not employed. So I didn't have, I either had to go off on disability or continue to work. And fortunately, there was a lot of flexibility in my job. I just needed to get to the hospital at some point each day to see my patients. So if that meant sleeping in until noon, rounding in the afternoon, and then coming home to do my notes. Luckily, the EMR was remote. So I was able to do that until November of 2021. What changed things for me was, when COVID hit, I refused to see another patient. I've been through too much for COVID, to end my life. And I had no guarantee that the patient that I was sitting across from didn't have COVID. So I stopped seeing patients. I was still medical director of the hospital, that I was working at. So I had income from that, but, I walked away from the income from seeing the patients. But then it got to the point, as the pandemic got better, that I still didn't feel comfortable seeing patients. And the hospital needed a medical director that was going to see patients too. And so luckily, my kids were in college. My husband was, systematically getting our finances in order, and we downsized our house. And so I made the decision just to go on disability, because really I was eligible for disability at the beginning. Anyone stage 4 is eligible for Social Security disability, but I chose to continue to work. And that process was very easy to go through. It only took about 3 months. So then my part-time job was filling out applications for my disability. I had a private policy and Social Security disability, and that went very smoothly. And so now I'm just kind of getting used to not having somewhere to go every day. And so I replaced my job with patient advocacy. And so that's where I got involved with Living Beyond Breast Cancer and the Hear My Voice advocacy program. So that's my job now, and I'm enjoying it.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. And thank you for the honesty. These are hard questions. So could we talk for a few minutes about treatment changes? I know you have talked about them, and specifically, I know that you've talked about changing treatments and kind of waiting until you need to change again. And I wonder if all of you could weigh in a little bit on the kinds of things that you think about in terms of when it's time to make a change, or the kinds of conversations that you have with your doc when it's time to make a change.
I'll bow out of this conversation because I have never had to officially change. I've never had progression. So I'm still on my first line of treatment. So I'm going to let Tony and Ann take this conversation.
Yeah, and I'm still on my first line of treatment as well. So Ann,
And over to you.
I am so
You're
lucky. I'm trying them all.
Absolutely.
I think so. I was diagnosed de novo in 2009 and metastatic in 2016, and for years actually did the Ibrance Faslodex combination, and that was great. But it started breaking down 2 or 3 years ago for me, and I've been on probably, I don't count them, I know there are a lot of women who do, but probably 5 different treatments, 5, maybe even 7 since then, as recently as just in the last couple of months. And I think I go through the same thing so many of us do. You Google, you look at the websites for research for what other test can you have done, where is it progressed to, and that's always been a challenge for a long time. Mine was just in my bones, but then it spread to, my ovaries, my lymph nodes, my brain, pleural effusion, pericardial effusion. So, as it continues to spread, I think we're always looking for how much data can we get on what's really going on there. And I look at a lot of it as a scale, from good to bad. Where is this? Is it, full of malignant cells, or is it just a few malignant cells? And what does that look like? And I'm not medical staff like Stephanie and Tony. I don't get it. So I have to come home and research everything myself and figure it out. And my oncologist is really good at giving background and trying to fill me in and make sure that I understand what the options are available. But, and then just recently, I had a severe reaction to a drug, which had never happened to me before, but it's carboplatin, which apparently happens after 8 or 10 treatments, and got me a 5-day stay at the hospital. That was pretty exciting, but it was really terrifying. And at that point, I kind of did the whole time out as the doctors were talking about, well, we could try it again, but you're going to have you're going to go into the ICU. There's going to be a resuscitation team in place just in case. And we called the timeout and we're like, we're going for a second opinion. This just doesn't fly. What else is there? I'm not ready to risk that. I feel like that there's more drugs out there that we haven't tried, more data that we could get a current view of. And that's kind of where we're at right now. of looking at what the second opinion says and what my traditional oncologist that I've had for 13 years says, and making the best decision for me, because I want my quality of life to still be pretty good. I miss my walks as my feet have had more and more neuropathy, or the pleural effusion's taken more away from breathing, or my vision's really suffered from some of the opioids that I've taken. So we're just trying to find what makes the most sense to kill the cancer or keep it under control for the longest period possible, while I can still live a life that's pretty good and gets me to spend time with my family and my friends, which is what I'm all here for. So, and to do advocacy on the side as well. But it does come down to family and friends. That's where I want to spend my time.
You sound very, very clear on what you're hoping to achieve with these treatment changes. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that feels like an important component of the decision-making process, being very clear about where you want to be with your treatment.
Absolutely.
So
I think for different people, it's different phases. I can be pretty content. I don't have to travel the world anymore. That used to be my goal. I've ratcheted back. But a trip here or there, and just to be able to still taste my food, still be able to go to the bathroom and take care of myself. Those are just some basic goals that I have. And I'm pretty honest with my oncologist of where my goals are. Last year, it was seeing my kids graduate from high school, and I was fortunate enough to see that happen. And this year, I just want to be here to spend time with them this summer. So it changes. Your goals change.
Goals change. And just one more question on this topic. Is it hard for you to have these conversations with your oncologist? Are there obstacles to having a kind of an honest conversation, which seems really important?
Wow, that is a fabulous question. So if you would have asked me this a few weeks ago, before I went into the hospital for the reaction, I would have said, no, I think we're pretty good. But as I came out and I was looking at my options and I was talking with my PA, who I've had for about 12 years, like we've kind of grown up together in a lot of ways. And I kind of hope my oncologist isn't listening to this, because he'll freak if he hears what she said. But I went in and I was very realistic, and I said, are you going to talk to me about hospice today? Like, I know that the medical drawer of options is shrinking. And she said, no, we're not. There's still several things that we think you should look at and whatnot. And I said, well, is Dr. Joe, we'll just call him Joe, will he ever talk to me about hospice? And she said, no, he won't. She said, when you're ready to talk about hospice, I'll talk to you about it. Your infusion nurse, who you've also known for decades, will talk to you about it. But he will probably never bring it up. That is not his. He is so determined to heal and to help you find that cure and to get you to last as long as possible, that the hospice discussion's probably not one on his back. And I so appreciated like that moment of honesty, that if you want the conversation, you're going to have to push it, or we're happy to have it with you when we think you're ready and you're not there yet. And I really, it didn't matter what they poked me with that day. I felt better already, like just walking out. So yeah, but I know that's not everybody's experience either.
No, but I appreciate you bringing that up. So, because it sounds to me so important to have a number of trusted medical personnel.
Absolutely.
I see Tony nodding her head too. So Stephanie's smiling. A number of medical personnel that you trust, that you can talk about these hard things with.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
Great.
But not all oncologists, she's right, not all oncologists feel comfortable talking about, where this disease can take us, or some overdo it. So it just depends. My experiences have been good, but now that I've kind of come out of my, personal bubble of cancer and have met other people going through the same thing, you hear other people's responses, or other people's experiences, and being a physician myself, I realize that not everybody has the best bedside manner, even those that are in in oncology that deal with, life-threatening diseases and take care of the sickest people.
But when I feel on that platform is that there are those physicians, unfortunately, that do their patients such an distrust or unjust when it comes to knowing when to stop. Or, even if the patient, just to be able to be open and have that conversation. Everybody knows I want to go to hospice care. I want hospice care before the actual very end. And I say that because I'm a hospice nurse. And I've seen where patients have benefited from hospice, that come in sooner than later. And then I've seen those that the doctor has tried everything but the kitchen sink. And the patient gets no benefit whatsoever from hospice care. And it makes it bad for everybody involved. It makes especially the hospice nurse look really bad because she's having trouble, quote unquote, helping control symptoms. So I will be one to speak up to say I know when I hope I will be ready. And I can say that, and I honestly, that may change, but I can say that now just because I've not had progression and I don't know what it's like to go from one treatment to another treatment to another treatment. So, again, when that part about being flexible, your thoughts change as well. So as you go along this trajectory of crappy disease.
Yeah. And like Ann said, priorities change, right?
That's
Our goals change along the way. But I think what I'm hearing from everybody is the importance of being aware and clear on what your own goals are so that you're able to communicate them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And don't back down.
And so speaking of communication, I'll say that one more time and a little louder.
Don't back down. I mean, if your goals are your goals and your doctor or your team is trying to sway you some other way, I mean, come on. It's remember, and I tell people this all the time, and it's not that I'm being mean. It's just that I'm being honest. It truly is all about me. You know what I mean? It is all about me. Yes. And if it weren't for people like me to have this crappy disease, guess what? You wouldn't have a job. So technically, it truly is all about me. And you need to make it that way.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks. Hey, Janine, did we get any questions?
We do have a couple of questions. One is just to have each of you say how long you've been living with metastatic breast cancer and whether things ever get easier in terms of making decisions about traveling or planning when you're on one particular treatment for a longer time. So why don't we start with Tony? How long ago were you diagnosed?
Okay, so I have triple negative breast cancer, and I was diagnosed with a recurrence to my left lung and mediastinal lymph nodes. So those are the lymph nodes behind the chest bone. And actually was diagnosed pre-op. I was getting ready for DIP flap reconstruction. I asked for a chest x-ray, and unfortunately the chest x-ray showed, well, fortunately and unfortunately it showed, metastasis to the lungs. So I've been on and off chemotherapy since 2015. And I think, I was probably living year to year, but I'm now coming up on 8 years. And, I didn't think I'd see my kids go to college, but they've, graduated from college and, getting their jobs. I'm seeing more things and doing more things and living longer. And now I can see myself, I'm 59, or I'm about to turn 59. I could see myself getting to 65. So I'm really at the point where I'm starting to plan more for the future than I felt I could before.
Thanks, Tony. Ann, how long have you been living with metastatic breast cancer?
So I've been living with metastatic breast cancer since 2016. And did a bout of chemo that very first, right after I was diagnosed, to get it under control, and then did Ibrance Facilitator, where I traveled a lot, and I did I would plan things out a couple years. Actually ran a marathon, planned that out. So I felt pretty good during all of that. But I would say over the last 2 years, as I've had a lot of progression, I plan in 3-month increments. It's from scan to scan, and which kind of makes me sad, even though I buy all the travel insurance and things like that. But that's just the space where I am right now, and I just try and make the best of what I can. So, yeah.
Thanks, Anne. Stephanie, how long have you been living with metastatic breast cancer?
I was diagnosed de novo in July of 2015. So in July, it will be 8 years. And I started my current treatment in March of 2016 after I finished the ACT regimen, and that is fulvestrant Poslodex. And then I was so scared, I only did things like in 3-month increments. But I lived my life like always. I for 3 years, I knew nothing about other people that had metastatic breast cancer. I didn't know that there was a community. I didn't know anything about advocacy. I knew nothing. Only going to my cancer center, getting my treatments, discussing things with my physician, and going to work as a hospice nurse on call, working 7 days on, 7 days off. So I lived great, working 2 weeks out of the month. The weeks that I didn't work were the weeks that, I tried to do treatment stuff around. So I could have a week off to travel or enjoy and pretend like this really didn't exist. But I planned only 3 months at a time because that was scan time. And it wasn't until COVID that I got brassy and started planning 6 months to a year out. And then COVID hit and shut everything down. So then I had to start all over. So, I'm better. I can look at a year ahead now a little bit, but I'm too scared because I don't want to be too quote unquote cocky to look further than that. With knowing that the other shoe may fall.
May I interject something? I've been reading the chat. I think I may have misled a few people when I said patient advocacy is my new job. So, the patient advocacy, I think some people are wondering, oh, how can I get that job? Well, there are no patient advocacy jobs out there. It really is more volunteer. So I was just saying that I've replaced the energy that I had that went towards doing my job and taking care of others is now, being directed towards patient advocacy efforts.
Thanks for the clarification, Tony. I appreciate that. Any other questions before I move on, Janine?
You can go ahead.
Great, thanks. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about family relationships and some of the changes that maybe you've noticed with family members or friends in your relationships, in the ways that you communicate with your family. Is it hard to communicate with your loved ones, your kids, about what's going on?
I started with my husband. You can read my face. It's always been that way. So he would always look at me. And so I learned to only tell him part of the truth. I wouldn't lie. I would only tell him selective things because I didn't want him to worry or be concerned or that kind of thing. But then I realized that I was holding on to so much more than I needed to. And it was really getting to the point to where I was getting depressed about it. And I was that way with my family. If they see me look good, then, they'll be okay. So I was so focused on making sure that I was there for everybody. I needed to be the rock for everybody, and then they would be okay. and I found out that your true friends know the backstory, or they know you, so they waited until I came out and said, I can't do it anymore. I'm tired. And told the truth that, there are days that I don't feel like getting up, or I'm having bad days. And those people understood at the time, but I still had those that I have learned that I think it's for the fear of not knowing what to say. They don't say anything and they go away. So and that's okay too. God will allow those people to be in your life that wants to be in your life. So my family is fine. We have conversations. I have more open conversations with my daughter, who's a nurse. With my son, I treat that one almost like with my husband, selective information, because he doesn't want all of it. So that's how.
So you've noticed changes in your own comfort level of communicating with different folks.
Exactly.
Perfect. Tony, Ann, any challenges in communication that you've noticed? Any changes in the ways that you communicate?
Well, so the first time I was diagnosed early stage, my daughters weren't in kindergarten yet, but they knew that I had breast cancer. Like we explained that much to them. And we were pretty honest. I mean, you lose your hair, you're laying on the couch all the time. Something's definitely wrong with mom. Mm-hmm. So it was obvious. And we tried to begin a pretty open communication with them. And then when I was diagnosed metastatic, because of a friend of mine, they knew right away what stage 4 was, and they knew that wasn't good, and they were terrified. And so we've had some really tough conversations as their bodies were just starting to develop breast. And then I'm fighting with mine all the time just to stay alive. So, I think that we've always tried to give them the information that was honest and upfront without scaring the hell out of them at the same time. And that's worked for the most part. I think that, they understand and appreciate the honesty, and they're pretty transparent with their own lives with us, which is nice as teenagers or young adults now. I think the other thing, not to plug other organizations, but if you have young children, Camp Kesem is a great outlet for young kids. It's Kesem, Kesem, and Inheritance of Hope does a lot of great things for families and gives you opportunities and some discussion guides. I think LBVC has some too, just places to start that conversation, especially with young kids, with more and more women being diagnosed that have young children. It is a different conversation when they're younger. And it's different internalizing it too. It's, what's my legacy going to be if they don't remember who I am? Will they remember my chocolate chip cookies? Kind of trying to find the things that you can do and solidify so that it helps you feel better physically, but also emotionally, just knowing that there's a connection there on whatever level you choose to share with your children. And I think I also learned that if I didn't share it, by golly, the rumor mill would. So I may as well tell them, because they would hear it from church or teachers or whatever. So I needed to be pretty honest and upfront. And we don't live in a small town, but we have a tight-knit community. So now that they're young adults, it's a little bit easier, I guess, to have the conversations. But it's a very different conversation than it was when they were preteens.
And my experience is the same. My kids were starting middle school when I was diagnosed with early breast cancer. So we didn't tell them until the port was in and treatment was about to start. And we just told them that I had cancer, that I was going to start treatment, and we engaged them in different ways that they could help around the house. When I was diagnosed with the metastasis, they were going into high school. And we kind of took, I guess, the easy way out and just said, instead of saying stage 4, I was preparing for surgery anyway. So something was about to happen. And I just finally told them, I'm not having surgery because my cancer came back and I'll have to start treatment again. And so all they knew was we were dealing with breast cancer again. They didn't know that it had spread to another area. Now that they have finished college, they both went into nursing majors. So we talk a lot more about what stage 4 means, and that it spread to another organs and could cause death. So that has been something that we've kind of progressed to over time. With my husband, he's attended every doctor's appointment, every treatment up until COVID. He couldn't come to treatments with me anymore, but he's been very involved. But it's interesting because we've been sort of in survival mode for 10 years and our life is sort of going into a new phase. So we've been talking a lot more. And actually, we had a really frank discussion over the weekend, and my husband finally admitted that from the very beginning, he looked to see what my prognosis was, and he's been living every couple of years thinking that he's going to be planning a funeral in 1 to 2 years. And he finally admitted that this weekend, and I never knew that. And then my daughter even asked me this morning if I've made my wishes, known about how, I would like things to be done, in the event of my death with regards to funeral. So we're really starting to have some, more specific discussions about what this disease really means and what the future could look like.
Thanks, Tony. So I hear that all of you, like all the things that you've said prior to this, are adjusting your conversations according to your children's needs, your own needs, your partner's needs, and trying to just have as open conversation as you can based on what is comfortable for you and what is needed by them.
Yes.
I want to take a pause here. We're at 2:45, and I just want to make sure, do we have any other questions, Janine?
We do. We have a number of questions.
Great.
So the first one is, this person is saying, my family's very familiar with my metastatic diagnosis and we have adult children, but I have a 5-year-old grandchild. How do I explain to my grandchild why grandma is always fatigued?
Well, there are quite a few books that have been written. I was on a panel discussion about how to discuss cancer with kids. And in preparation for that, I did a lot of research, and actually there are resources through Living Beyond Breast Cancer about different books that address this issue at different developmental stages. And so fortunately, there are a lot of resources out there. I haven't ever had to talk to a 5-year-old. I don't know if anybody else has, but that's
my grandson is 7, and it was actually, my daughter was pregnant when I was diagnosed, and she was a high-risk pregnancy. So Trey has actually grown up with Mimi being sick. So it is, he doesn't say much when Mimi's tired. And he never questions or never asks. But I have heard him say that, having a conversation with his mom, well, Mimi has cancer. And I was like, oh, let me listen to this conversation. Where is this going? And, and his mom said, and so what does that mean? Oh, I don't know. I just know she has cancer. So, he doesn't have the concept yet to put together, thank God. But, he has grown with Mimi being short hair, no hair, having hair, but not really having that concept. So I think he's very intelligent. He'll put it together, or he'll ask the questions to get the information he needs. For sure. But I don't believe in hiding things either. So, if they ask, especially if they ask, they should be told something.
And I wanted to say something about friends, because you asked about those relationships. I think what happens with metastatic breast cancer is with your local friends, you end up kind of disappearing from the social life because you can't do all the things that you used to do and attend all of the events. But I do keep in contact with them, let them know, when I'm going to my appointments and what the outcome is, so I kind of have like, this cheering squad locally that I don't get to see often, but they're kept abreast of how my, cancer treatment is coming along. One thing I can say is I really have reached back and reconnected with friends from all aspects of my life. And, life was just happening and I didn't have a chance to do that. But metastatic breast cancer can give you a reason to really reach back and so I've reconnected with college friends. We take girls' trips every other year. We're actually going to Italy this year. I reconnected with high school friends. Even at the conference, my maid of honor is coming from New Jersey, to see me. My cousin who was in my wedding is coming to see me. So I'm taking the opportunity with being in Philadelphia to try to reconnect with people, outside of my cancer bubble as well. And so that can often be a very important, a very important thing, because those people remember you and they want to be a part of your life. And it's a good time to really reconnect with people.
Thanks, Tony. Sounds like a great source of support. Appreciate that. Janine, do we have time for another question or two?
Why don't you go ahead and I'll put in my questions.
Oh, you'll
Yeah,
put in your questions?
I'll ask
Okay.
when because I know you want to get to your next question.
Well, yeah, I do want to know if there's, if any of your priorities have changed over time. I've heard a lot flexible, and it does sound like, and Anne spoke to the fact that, as her children got older, her priorities have changed a little bit.
Yeah, you become more purposeful and try to create experiences. Things become less important and experiences become more important in this situation, in a nutshell.
Thank you.
That's what I was going to say. Intentional, being more intentional with the things that I do now, and trying to do more things with my family to enjoy my life. To make those memories for them as well. I would hope so. I will be 65 this year. So I'm really wanting to have a big old bang out kind of a party, and really go big or go home. That's what I always say, go big or go home. So, priorities have changed. But also I have to, stay focused on the quality of my life as well. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
So there's this song, I think it's by the Highwaywomen, and it's A Crowded Table, and it's I Want a House with a Crowded Table. And it reminds me of like when my grandfather, we used to go to his house for Sunday suppers. And like for a long time in my life, those were like the bane of my existence. And I'm like, I got too much to do to go sit and eat barbecue and cake for 3 or 4 hours. But now that is like the highlight of my weekends, is if I can get either friends or my daughters and their friends to just come have, it's not great food necessarily, but it's pizza or a lasagna or whatever I can eat that weekend. Just to come hang out and to laugh. I think that, I joke that my word for 2023 is laughter. And so I'm seeking out more movies, more books, more friends who make me laugh, and try and keep it all a little balanced, because there's plenty of that somber cloud over my head on Thursdays when I typically do treatment. So I'm looking for as much laughter as possible at a table that's just as crowded as I can get it. So.
And I wanted to say one last thing. One thing that often comes up in support group discussions, people talk a lot about legacy projects. So there's some people that, that if they have really young kids, they talk about buying cards for different milestones in their life, graduation, wedding, and writing out those cards in case they're not here for those milestones. And one of the legacy projects that I want to do, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Storyworth, but you become a member for a year and you answer questions over the year, and they compile it into a book and can supplement it with pictures. And that's definitely one of the legacy projects that I haven't gotten around to that I would like to do. The other thing is I want to split up, all the pictures. They talk about having a box for each family member or each child where you go through all your pictures and divide them up, so that that's already done, and none of us have an expiration date, but we're all faced with death more than the average person because of the diagnosis that we're dealing with. And so the more we can be prepared for that, the better.
Thank you. Janine, how we doing?
So unfortunately, we're close to the end of the session, and I think we should go to our last question, which,
Sure.
So Cheryl, why don't you go ahead and ask your last question?
Yeah, I just want to know if there's anything that we have not talked about that you feel might be important for our attendees to know about.
I would like to say that, everybody, and I do mean everybody, you may not admit it to yourself, but everybody has those moments where you feel like that you can't put one foot in front of the other, or you can't get out of bed, or you just can't anymore. I had to learn to tell myself, it's okay to be in that space for a short period of time. But I also had to make sure that I don't stay there long. I don't live there. It's okay to go visit, hang out, have pizza and beer, whatever, but you need to come out. And if you're having trouble coming out of that dark space, or you want to talk to somebody before that you have other issues going on that you need to talk about, I encourage you to reach out to somebody in your neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
A friend, a neighbor, mental health provider, social worker, oncologist team. And if you can't find anybody, look me up, call me, I'll chat with you. But know that it's okay. You're not by yourself. We've all gone through that. And I know for a fact I'll probably go through that again sometime during this journey. So
Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you. Tony or Ann, anything that you would like to add in the last couple of minutes we got?
I guess from my perspective, when I was first diagnosed, my mom asked me why I wasn't angry. And I told her that I didn't have time to be angry. Mm-hmm. And it hit me then that no, your family is not always your best advocate. Mm-hmm. And you set the tone. And, from that day forward, I tried very hard to have a positive tone. But like Stephanie just said, not all days are like, I'm not a Pollyanna either. Yesterday was a totally different day. But, I think all in all, we set the tone for our family and our friends of how we're navigating everything and the expectations of how we need their support. So if that's some little sliver of control in all of this, I'll take it and I'll run with it as best I can. So.
Thanks, Ann.
And my last point would just be, it's important to connect with others that are going through this. It took me 8 years, to sort of climb out of my bubble and meet others that are going through this. And even though we have different subtypes and different treatments, there's still common experiences that we all have. And our friends and family can't relate the same as someone else who's going through the same thing. And there are very many options now. Virtually, support groups are available. So Facebook groups, or Zoom groups, it really does make a difference to have someone to relate to when you're dealing with this.
Thank you all. You have all added so much to certainly even my understanding of what it's like to deal with some of the tough stuff. And I thank you for your wisdom and your grace in sharing all of that with us. So we are at 2:59, and I want to thank LBBC for letting us have this forum.
Well, thank you to you, Cheryl, for your expert facilitation. And we're so just incredibly grateful to Stephanie, Tony, and Anne. We are so fortunate to have people like you choose to advocate with Living Beyond Breast Cancer and to share your stories. So thank you so much for this really honest conversation about the tough stuff. For all of you with us, I'm sorry that we weren't able to answer all of your questions. I saw so many great connections happening in the chat. I want to let you know you can continue to connect with one another on the platform, as well as through our website, lbbc.org, where you'll find lots of resources, information, and support for people who are living long-term with metastatic breast cancer. Thank you also for spending this time with us today. We're looking forward to welcoming you all back this weekend, whether you're with us online or here in person in Philadelphia. And we'll be having our keynote presentations there and lots more opportunities to connect. So hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and we can't wait to see you again this weekend. Have a good day.